everyone. Thanks for joining today's Tao sharing with me. Hope everyone's doing good and staying safe around the world. So today's sharing is the continuation of what I did last time. It's the July25 Prajna Sutra, which is popularly known as the Diamond Sutra. So we did chapter 1, 2, and 3 last time. So today we can go over chapter 4 and 5. I was initially thinking of going over chapter 6 as well, but then I realized there's so much to talk in these two chapters, and then chapter 6 is considered as part 2 of it. So this is like a continuation of our last session, essentially, but not a part 2. Part 2 will be when we go on to chapter 6. So yeah, before going on to the new chapters, we can quickly review what we did last session, since it's like a recap of what we talked. So first, we talked about the four main aspects of Diamond Sutra that was covered. So the entire Diamond Sutra is basically these four aspects, which is giving without attachment to self, liberating beings without notions of self and others, living without attachments, cultivating without attainments. So these are the four main aspects. Like there's different so the book is basically the writing between the conversations that they had between Buddha and one of his disciples called Shubhukti, and all of those conversations are basically compiled into these four main aspects. So when we talked about chapter 1. Chapter 1 is basically the reason of the Dharmic assembly. This chapter is basically explaining how the Dharmic, like all the sharings back then happened to begin with. So how the setting of how it was happened, like Buddha, we talked about how Buddha, during the mealtime, he goes to the city to beg for food and charity, and how he does that without any discrimination, and how he taught his cultivators, his followers, to go every house door by door, even though they know that some houses they won't give them any food, they still have to go stop and wait and give them the opportunity every day. So we don't discriminate anyone and give a chance for every single species to do their dharmic spreading, and also how Buddha himself was a living example of how he didn't just ask his disciples to go do it. He went along, and he was being an example of going to every house and begging for food, and coming back to his like, I don't know, under the tree or the place where he teaches, doing his own chores, like putting his own robe and the plate away and making his own place where he sits, rather than his disciples doing it for him. So like how down to earth and how you are responsible for your own things, and with no discrimination, is basically what we covered by explaining how the Dharmic assembly was set up back in the days. And chapter 2 was basically introducing Subukti, the student who we will be talking about towards the entire session, entire book. He started with asking two questions in chapter 2. So the first question was, how do they dwell their bodhi mind? The second question was, how do they conquer their deluded thoughts? Right? So bodhi, again, if you guys remember, means awakening, awakened mind. And chapter 3 is basically Buddha answering to two questions from chapter 2. If anyone from last session remember the answer for how do they dwell their bodhi mind? Well, it's good that we're recapping, so we can go through it again. So basically, what Buddha said was Wait, yeah, there. By spreading Dharma and Tao is how Dharma or Tao. So we talked about Dharma. Whenever I say Dharma, it's also like how we say Tao in the temple here. So it's basically the same. Like it's the eternal truth. It's the awareness. It's the spreading. So how do you dwell your awakened mind? Is by spreading Dharma. So how is that? We talked quickly about how when you spread Dharma, you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about others. And when you're thinking about others and you're thinking about helping others without discrimination, is when you become selfless. And that makes you someone with no attachments, and you're not attached to your own self, your own materialistic things, which will help you dwell on your awakened mind. The second question was, how do they conquer their deluded thoughts? Does anyone have any idea? Any ringing bells? All right. Again, so he said selflessness, and so no expectation is when you can conquer your deluded thoughts. So the first question was by spreading Dharma, right? By spreading Dharma. But how do you get rid of the thoughts? Is by having no attachment while you're spreading those Dharma, is what Buddha explained briefly. And then now, after we talked, we can go into the new chapter, chapter 4. Chapter 4 is the greatest gift. So how I do this presentation is, first I'll read through the passage, which was from the book, Diamond Sutra. Like I refer two books. So this is one of the book, and there's another book called Cutting Through the Wisdom, Diamond Cut Through the Wisdom by Ik Nan Hat. I'm still not sure if I'm spelling his name right. So I read both books, and I'm picking things from both the books, which makes easy for me to explain and understand as well. So first I'll go through what it's written, the literal translation, and then I'll try to explain it, what he's trying to say through those explanation, right? So yeah, chapter 4, the greatest gift. The Buddha continued, Subhuti, when a bodhisattva practices generosity, all charity should be free from secular phenomena of sight, sound, odor, touches, and mind. Subhuti, bodhisattvas should thus give without dwelling on secular phenomena. So, so this prajna paramita basically is the practice of getting rid of all the notions. This entire book, right? Like getting rid of the attachments is one of the main aspects of Diamond Sutra, and which is also called as the perfection of wisdom, and that's how you perfect your wisdom. This chapter is Diamond Sutra is one of the last of the 6 paramitas. So there's 6 in total, and which bodhisattvas are the awakened Buddhist followers who go through all these studyings. This is the last sutra that they have to go through. These are the first 5 that they have to go through before going through the Diamond Sutra. The first one is being generosity, which is dana paramita. Dana means giving up, giving things. So that's generosity. Mindfulness training, which is sila paramita. Endurance, which is actually shanta paramita. Diligence is virya paramita. And then meditation is dhyana paramita. So they have to go through all these 5. And then you go through the 6th one, which is the Diamond Sutra Prajna Paramita, right? So basically what we're talking about, what Buddha is saying in this is, while helping others, you do it in the spirit of singlenessness, not distinguishing between yourself and others. You do not base your work on the perception of a self, person. Basically, doing your generosity without any discrimination or without any favoring anyone, right? For example, uh, all I can think of is the rain. So when it rains, when rain doesn't say, "Oh, you're poor. I'm not gonna rain on you. I'm gonna only rain on this like rich people area because they're rich." No, rain just rains everywhere. When it rains on everyone evenly, without any discrimination. So that's something that I was thinking that I can relate to, and I think I mostly relate to a lot of like nature things, and it helps me to learn better. And you can see. I was gonna say that Buddha was a rebel. You know why? Like back in the days in Hindu culture, there is a lot of caste systems, and people have been segregated into different castes. And sadly, the lower caste people won't be able to go to the temple or certain temples. They have their own temples they can only go to, and they cannot attend a lot of sutra teachings by a certain class of people, right? And then you can see Buddha coming out and saying that, oh, everyone's equal. Everyone has to like no one is like up or below or anyone else, and everyone has to go through their sutra classes. And he would have everyone from any class, doesn't matter, with no discrimination in his dharmic assembly. And you can see how hard it could be back in the days, like without all this freedom of speech, without all this like media and internet. He probably had created a lot of enemies for sure. It's not good for his PR. I don't think it's gonna help him with spreading dharma. But he went with the truth. He tried. He sticked, and he practiced what he preached. Right?
Especially coming from the top of the pyramid, he was the prince.
Oh yeah.
So he any like sound mind would not give up all those privileges.
Yeah.
Right? Because he can have anything he wants, and he can go anywhere he wants, and he can do whatever he wants. And then he chose to have this cultivation life and purpose.
Oh, that's
very amazing.
That's Buddha nature. Oh, I'm jumping ahead. I'm going to talk about Buddha nature in for the chapter too. Yeah, so that's totally right, and we can see how rebellious Buddha was.
So I have a question. Does it mean that back in the days, all the cultivators need to go through these 5, like one after the other, to do the training, and then they study?
That's what the book said. Yes, bodhisattvas, when they go through all the sutras. So, Diamond Sutra is a part of paramitas. It's called 6 paramitas. So Diamond Sutra is Vajrachedika Prajna Paramita, right? Which is the 6th one. The 6th one is the wisdom. So the first one is generosity, mindful kindness, endurance, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. So you go through all those paramitas.
And they have to pass and conquer it through in order to become a bodhisattva.
Yeah. So it's not like here in temple. Well, in today's world, it's very less people who have time or dedicated time to go through all these paramitas. So today we are like doing like short-term courses or like 2-day Tao seminars and stuff like that. But you can see how hard it is back in the days. You can't just like go 2 days and then call. Yeah, I'm done. I'm enlightened. No. Hi, Jill.
Hi. The second parameter says mindfulness training.
Yeah.
And then the 5th one says meditation. I'm just wondering the difference between the two, because I think the Chinese has a different. I think in Chinese there's the translation for it, and the translation for mindfulness training, if I'm thinking it correctly, is a little bit different from the Chinese translation of it. So I'm just wondering, from your understanding, what does mindfulness training, the Sila Paramita is, and I'm wondering if there's a loss in translation when it goes to Chinese.
I'm sure there's something lost in translation. I'm not sure. Let me quickly look it up because I didn't go deep into all these ones. This is while I was reading about this, I saw this 5, and I just wanted to share the quick names. And this was the name that I saw. So Silla.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I just a thought, because I think in Chinese it means.
What does it say in Chinese translation? Can you share it?
By looking at the 5, if I'm thinking it correctly, it could be 持戒, which means kind of following some rules.
Virtues, morality, or proper conduct.
Yeah, proper conduct.
Proper conduct.
Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah. I think that's what mindful training. Well, following conduct, you be mindful of your conduct. I think. Yeah, I think so. Maybe that's why they wrote it as mindfulness. These days we talk, when you say meditation, you also talk about mindfulness, right? Mindfulness and meditation. So that's probably why they probably wrote it this way.
Yeah, and then even I guess in that sense, just the word meditation itself in that Chinese word that they use feels more like getting into a state of Zen.
That's dhyana, yes. Yeah.
So like I don't
meditation
know, like
is
meditation
just,
in English is you all you think of is like sitting there, closing
in,
your eyes, and
breathe
then
in, breathe
breathing.
out. Yeah. Before learning more about meditation, I used to talk to Vikram about a lot of this, and Vikram once mentioned like there's several types of meditation, right? So it's the one that you're aware of, it's the one that you think right away. But when you say dhyanam in our language is way beyond than meditation. It's like actually like enlightenment kind of thing. It's not just It's not just like closing your eyes and sitting there.
Yeah.
And there's different type of dhyanam too. Like there's this dhyana where you do the ritual. You pray and you say the sutras and you do the dhyanam. So that's a different type of meditation. So all these are ways to attain enlightenment.
Yeah. And then going back to that mindfulness training, the Chinese explanation for it is first to follow the conduct. And because you wanted to prevent yourself from doing any misconduct or anything bad, so you are constantly sort of being mindful of your action, right?
Mindful
so
of your actions,
then maybe that's why it also in the English translation
training,
it used mindfulness training.
Yeah, it says trainings. So that's probably why. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. It's a very good question because I can see that I didn't realize that because I was just too much into, because I'm reading this and I kind of didn't see it, but yeah, it's a good observation.
I find it amazing how it started with what's the language?
Sanskrit.
Yeah, it started with Sanskrit, and then it probably got translated into some sort of language, and then it got translated into Chinese, and then I'm not even sure if this English was from Chinese or from another language or from Sanskrit, but it's great that we are having this discussion and we can have a deeper understanding of what each of them really means.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. And speaking of how we have to do the charity without any discrimination, I was thinking of our everyday life, and I was thinking of what I can think of, and anyone is welcome to share their own experience of like sharing without any discriminations. But before that, I would like to share mine. I think when I go to the temple, I see one thing that's been sincerely practiced is I don't see any discrimination, right? So it's not like you have to belong to any part of a caste or any part of like religion or something to go to the temple. Anyone can go to the temple and anyone can sit there, can have their peaceful time or meditate or whatever they're wanting to experience, right? And one fine example would be that during Dao seminars, or any special events in the temple, during meal time, the tables have been set up for everyone, and then we all sit and eat together. One thing I observed is that there's probably like 200 people in the temple, right? We all go take our food, but then during this special events, this food is brought to your table, and there it's like a buffet, and the food is put in the middle of the table, and everyone can take food, right? But in every single table I've seen, and even in our table, everyone will start sharing the food. Like they're serving the food before eating. They don't just take it to their plate. Let's say I take the rice and I'll start like serving them, and then the other people in the table will take the veggies and they start serving. And it doesn't matter, a lecturer, a professor, the Tao masters, everyone is sharing. The first thing they do is like serving others, and once everyone's plate is full, we all thank the kitchen gods, the kitchen chefs, and everyone, and then we start eating. So I see everyone's waiting for everyone else's plate to be full and then eat together, which I thought is a very, very good gesture. And when I first went to the temple, I learned it by seeing from others, right? I didn't think of it, but when others did it, it was an inspiration, and I did that too. And I see that every time I've been to the Tao seminars like more than once, and I've seen new people coming to the seminars, and every time new people coming, and they'll start serving too, because they're being inspired. And I think it's a very good gesture, and it's a very good practice, and how we have to be kind and generous without any discrimination, without any judgmentation, treating everyone equally. Doesn't matter if you're a Tao master, doesn't matter if you're a lecturer, professor, or a senior Tao member, or like senior cultivator, or new to the temple. They're all treated equally. This was something that I was able to relate to when I was reading this. If anyone wants to share any one of their experiences, I can wait for like a few seconds before I move on to the next slide.
I can share something.
Yeah.
Not from me though. I recently heard a story about someone explaining the difference between a human's generosity versus a Buddha's generosity.
Mm-hmm.
So we as humans, say if you walk down you walk down the street in Gastown, and then you see a beggar, a homeless person sitting on the side of the sidewalk, and then you think, oh, this person is so poor. Let's see if I have some changes in my pocket. Maybe I can give them like, not too much, $1 or $2, or I can, go to Starbucks and buy them a bread so they can eat. And then you did exactly that. You think, oh, okay, let me get some coins in my pocket to give it to them. So that's a human giving. And this person explains Buddha giving is Buddha will walk by this person, dump all the coins in Buddha's pocket to give to the person, and then when Buddha walk away, he will forget about it. He wouldn't even remember that he did exactly that. So because Buddha is selfless, right? There's no concept of self when someone has attained Buddhahood. So there's no one giving, there's no one being the receiver, there's no one being gift. I don't know. Given? No being given, and there's no thing that's being given. So there's no concept of self, there's no concept of the other person, and there's no concept of what's being given. I thought that ties really well into what we're talking about here. That story is that true non-attachment is not just trying not to think about yourself, it's becoming a state of true selflessness, where you're not even aware that you're giving. You're not even aware. You're not thinking about, oh, I'm giving, but I should not think about that. I'm giving. You're not even aware. It's so natural.
It's like you don't take credit for what you're doing, basically, right? I think in the previous chapter we talked about that. It's like you don't take the credit. Let's say a Buddha or a Tao senior is helping you in enlightenment ceremony, or in educating, or in taking you to the enlightenment state. The Buddha cannot claim that he got enlightened because of me. Like there's no attachment. Like he said, I'm like a bamboo raft. You use me to float to the other shore, and once you reach the shore, you leave the raft behind. And the raft doesn't take the credit either. I can't take the credit that I helped you in reaching enlightenment or in anything. You don't take credit. Once you take the credit, you are getting attached to the secular phenomena, and then you lose your Buddhahood if you're already a Buddhahood. You can't attach to anything. That's like attaining nirvana, like selflessness and no attachment, is Buddha nature, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you're totally right. You're like talking about the book exactly. Thanks. So, same chapter 4, it continues. Subhuti, if when bodhisattvas do charity without dwelling on any secular phenomena, their blessings and virtue is as great as space. It cannot be measured. Shibukti, all the bodhisattvas should follow my entrustments so that their deluded thoughts can be eradicated and their minds will stay in peaceful states. So it's kind of saying what Jill was saying. So people usually think of secular phenomena and the forms like as stable and real, but according to Buddha and even modern science, right, the forms are basically like made of empty spaces. Any I'm gonna go a little sciencey with this because I thought it kind of I was able to relate with it. So any mass, like you see things that's like, okay, this is a solid rock, this is a solid like I don't know, phone or a computer. But if you go deep into it, any matter of mass, whether a rock, iron, wood, whatever, it is composed of like countless molecules, right? And which in turn is composed of a lot of atoms and subatomic particles, and all of which are held together by like electromagnetic fields or nuclear forces. And if I understood, and if I can share a video after this explaining how big an atom is. And if you really see, the most of the space in the atom is actually like it's empty space. So if you look deep into any materialistic things, or you think that's solid, it's basically kind of empty. I was pretty confused when they were trying to explain this, but also there's a recent study or recent findings that these empty spaces are filled with energy. So they are empty. It's not composed of any like atoms or neutrons and protons, but then there's an energy flux, like energy just flowing. We don't know what that energy is still there. So physicists say that when they enter the world of atomic particles, they can clearly see that our conceptualized world is an illusion. Due to our wrong perceptions about these 6 sense objects, we develop wrong perceptions of self. Therefore, while helping others, we must go beyond our wrong perception and be free from them, not holding on to anything. If we refuge in the things that collapse easily, then we will collapse easily too. So if we get attached to those things that are going to collapse easily, and then it means that we are going to be collapsing with that collapsible materials too, right? So just remember what I said about the atoms, right? I'm going to share a 5-minute video about what what the scientists say.
One of the most amazing things about atoms is that they are mainly empty space. If an atom were as wide as your arm span, then the electrons would all be whizzing about inside the volume enclosed by your fingertips. Meanwhile, the nucleus would be sitting in the center, and its diameter would be smaller than the width of a single human hair. So all of the atoms that make up you and me and all the seemingly solid things in the universe are mostly empty space. Now, this is incredible, but what is even more mind-boggling is that empty space is not truly empty. I know because I've seen it. This is a simulation by Professor Derek Lineweber at the University of Adelaide. It was made using a supercomputer to crunch the calculations of quantum chromodynamics. Now, that is the theory of fundamental particles called quarks, the building blocks of protons and neutrons, and how they interact with each other through gluons.
What you're looking at here is the energy density of the gluon field fluctuations. Where the little red spots come out, the energy density is very high, and it fades down through the colors. So in the lowest energy field fluctuations, I'm not rendering this animation so that we can actually see into it.
And what we see is a bubbling soup of quantum field fluctuations that come and go incredibly quickly. The frame rate of this simulation is 1,000,000 billion frames per second. Now that is truly high speed. The dimensions of this box are absolutely tiny. They are millionths of a billionth of a meter, roughly enough space to stick 2 protons. But there are no protons here. This is a simulation of the vacuum on its own, what we normally think of as empty space.
Empty space is actually full of these quark gluon field fluctuations. And on average, it is possible to annihilate a quark from empty space because it's not empty.
That just sounds like the most ridiculous idea, that you're meant to have empty space, and yet you can go and get rid of stuff from it.
That's right. So it isn't empty.
Now, it seems counterintuitive that the vacuum at its lowest energy state should contain all of this stuff. But in fact, to clear out the fluctuations and create a truly empty vacuum would require a lot of energy.
The empty vacuum actually costs an enormous amount of energy to create. And if you were able to create it, you discover that that is actually unstable, that any sort of perturbation would push that empty vacuum into something where the vacuum is actually full of quantum field fluctuations.
Well, this may not be as strange as it first appears. I mean, consider a permanent magnet. It has a magnetic field around it at low energy, at room temperature. And that's because the individual little magnetic moments of all the atoms inside are lined up. But if you were to heat it up, you would give thermal energy to all those particles, and at a certain point, called the Curie temperature, they would be so randomly aligned that there would no longer be an overall magnetic field. So it actually takes energy to get rid of the permanent magnetic field. This is just like the quantum vacuum. And understanding how the quantum vacuum fluctuations work gives us a sense of what the fundamental particles do, like where are you most likely to find a quark?
And it turns out that the quark likes to sit on top of those lumps. Now, those lumps come into and out of existence fairly quickly, and so we like to think of the quarks as hopping from one lump over to the next lump as it appears, and then on to another one. I like to think of it as a hiker trying to cross a stream that's running around. Every now and then a stone pops up as the water's swirling around it, so you put your foot there and then you look for the next spot. If you go quickly enough, you might not get your feet wet. So I think quarks are very much doing, well, we know quarks are very much doing the same thing.
So while it is true that you and I and all of the other atoms in the universe are mostly empty space, it is also true that empty space isn't truly empty. And in fact, it is these vacuum fluctuations which are essential for...
Yeah. So I hope it kind of made sense of what he was trying to say. We are basically empty, but filled with like energy inside, right? So if I'm trying to explain it by the way I kind of relate things. I'm able to relate things. I hope it kind of makes sense. Uh, it's not how we should be seeing things, because as a if you are in the Buddha nature, you should be able to see things beyond like through your own experience. It's different. I don't know how to explain it, but right now I can relate things like these and make it easy for me to understand. So uh, it's hard to imagine, but if you're able to see everything around us in a form of energy or particles, which is in a different state of energy with consciousness, which has lost its path, and that everyone needs help, then it would be easier for us to be non-discriminating and be kind to everyone. Is kind of what I'm trying to come from. While I was reading this chapter, the one thing that I was able to relate to in today's world was all these protests and problems that's going on these days in the news, like the Black Lives Matter protest, or even like COVID-19 discriminations about like people from different Asian like ethnicities. Like I heard from Sandy that people from Asian ethnicities are being discriminated, saying that, oh, the virus is from China or something like that, right? So all these discriminations, or even like underprivileged people who are not being treated equally, would not happen. And if we see everyone deep inside, it's it's yeah, it's tough. It's hard to explain, but you have to see beyond it, and that's what every bodhisattvas are going towards and trying to attain the selflessness with no discrimination, and trying to understand or trying to experience it, I think. So that is the greatest gift. The greatest gift is giving without attachment to self and without discrimination. And it's hard to explain, but I tried the way I see things, and I try to make sense by myself. If anyone wants to share or add anything or have any questions, you guys can go ahead. I'll give you a few seconds before I move on to the next chapter.
I'm just thinking if we could reach the state of giving without attachment to self and without discrimination, how all of our troubles will not be troubling us anymore.
Yeah. No expectations too, right? And so no attachment is with no expectations. So let's say I'm doing some help, and if I'm expecting, oh yeah, if I do help you today, you may help me in the future, and then in the future, that person may or may not help you, and that will disappoint you.
Yeah.
And then you're never in a state of peace or mindfulness, and it's like it's a very simple sentence, but it's very powerful and very hard to understand and practice, for sure.
And previously it was mentioned that you shouldn't kind of build your expectation on the materialistic point of view and world, so that you can think of like a lot of people who are seemingly like so successful in having everything. For example, like a young superstar or idol, but they still go through all these, and maybe some of them ended up committed suicide. Like, could it be that they based their self-value on the number of followers that they have, or the number of likes that they receive, or maybe how much they have in their bank, things like that, which is fundamentally pure illusion.
Things that will collide.
Yes.
Things that are not stable.
Cannot be relied
things
on.
That are not stable, or things that are not like those are delusional things. And if you're attached to those delusional things, you're gonna be collapsing with those delusional things. Why I shared that scientific video is because sometimes when I see it's hard for me. I can easily say like, yeah, like I'm not going to judge anyone, but then like it's hard for me. Like I think I'm still judging without my like
Without even knowing.
without even knowing I'm judging. So one thing that helped me is mostly thinking of everyone as an energy. I always thought of it as an energy. Like everything, like the tree, a rock, is a form of energy. You know, different. It's just in a different combination. Like it's the same energy, like atoms, same nucleus. But then, if it's put together in a different way, its properties are different. That it's water. Like if you put it in a different way, its properties are like it's a solid or it's a gaseous state. So when I see when I'm trying to see or do things without any judgment, I always try to think of them as like energies and particles. So sorry to say, I don't consider you guys as energies. In the sense, when I don't want to judge, right? It kind of helps me to take a step back and look at all physical world in a different way, and it's beyond just
what we see.
Beyond just what we see. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Thanks for sharing. And we can move on to chapter. Yeah, so chapter 4 is the greatest gift. And let's move on to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is realizing the Buddha nature. So this is what I said when Jill was talking about Buddha nature, right? So we're going to jump in deeper into that. So in chapter 5, Buddha continues saying, what do you think, Shubhakti? Is it possible to grasp the Tathagata by the means of bodily science? So Tathagata, when Buddha says Tathagata, it basically means himself. But in how do I say? It's like the godly let's say God, for example, right? He says, is it possible to grasp the God by means of bodily science? And then he says, his student says, no, world honored one. When the God Tathagata speaks of bodily science, there are no signs being talked about. So in this chapter, Buddha is teaching about existence beyond the physical being and how we should see things beyond our senses, right? To compare this to our everyday life, let's take an analogy. Like when Buddha sees a rose, does he recognizes it as a rose in the same way that we do? Of course he does. But before he sees the rose is a rose, the Buddha has seen the rose is not a rose. He has seen that it is made of non-rose elements with no clear differentiation between the rose and the other elements that are not the rose. When we see things, we generally use our senses to cut reality into pieces, saying this piece is like, let's say this piece is A, and A cannot be B, C, or D. But when A is looked deeper, when you look deeper into A, we see that A is comprised of B, C, and D, and everything else in the universe. So A can never exist by itself alone. Once we understand that A is not just A, we understand the true nature of A and are qualified to say that A is A or A is not A, but then A, as we see, is just an illusion of a true A. It could be very confusing. Let me explain it further. So if we look deep into A, right, and you see that A is a thing, for example, right? If you look deep into A and see that A is not A, we see A in its fullest flower. Like at that time, like love becomes true love, generosity becomes true generosity. Practicing the precepts become truly practicing the precepts, and support becomes true support. This is the way Buddha looks at a rose, and that is why he's not attached to that rose. It's basically scientific, but it's beyond scientific. When I was reading this passage and when I was going through this reference in that book, I remember a talk by Mr. Richard Feynman. He's one of the famous physicists, and he's also known as one of the good teacher. He's very influential teacher too. Let me share that with you guys, and I'm gonna talk about that.
I have a friend who's an artist, and he's sometimes taken a view which I don't agree with very well. He'll hold up a flower and say, "Look how beautiful it is," and I'll agree. And he says, "You see, as I, as an artist, can see how beautiful this is, but you, as a scientist, take this all apart, and it becomes a dull thing." And I think that he's kind of nutty. First of all, the beauty that he sees is available to other people and to me too. I believe, although I may not be quite as refined as aesthetically as he is, that I can appreciate the beauty of the flower. At the same time, I see much more about the flower than he sees. I could imagine the cells in there, the complicated actions inside, which also have a beauty. I mean, it's not just beauty at this dimension of 1 centimeter. There's also beauty at a smaller dimensions. The inner structure, also the processes. The fact that the colors and the flower evolved in order to attract insects to pollinate it is interesting. It means the insects can see the color. It adds a question. Does this aesthetic sense also exist in the lower forms? Why is it aesthetic? All kinds of interesting questions which the science knowledge only adds to the excitement, the mystery, and the awe of a flower. It only adds. I don't understand how.
Yeah. So this this talk is pretty. I think it explains a little bit further of what I'm trying to say. And I always thought that science is only adding on or helping us through a spiritual other way of understanding our spiritual being, and I don't really agree with the fact that science and spirituality are two different things. Anyways, this is one level of awareness, right? This is still a physical level of awareness. It's not a Buddha nature yet, but you start seeing a level deeper than what we usually see. So so we don't judge through our naked eyes. Like the artist is already judging him so badly, saying that, oh yes, scientists just break things apart and you don't see the beauty of the flower. But then, according to the scientist, he is seeing more beauty. He's just not able to explain it as artistic as the artist would. But then he sees beyond the single dimension, and this is one level. And then if you go deeper, that's when you go Buddha level of awareness, and you see things in a Buddhist nature, right? With no judgment and with no with no discrimination and different perspectives, and ultimately reaching no attachment and nirvana. Just a second. So then Buddha continues saying to Shibuti, all the secular phenomena are delusional. By the time you sense all the secular phenomena are not phenomena, instantaneously your Buddha nature will emerge. So when you say Buddha, the word Buddha is a nature, and it's not a human figure, right? We have Buddha statues everywhere, and people pray to the statue. Like why? Like we all need direction, a little help, if you'd say. Like a good leader or a parent is an inspiration for a child to follow at early stages of a childhood. With those inspirations, a child grows into its own being through its own experience. Same way, those Buddha statues that people pray to is an inspiration for cultivators to help begin their spiritual journey. The experience to see beyond the physical phenomena and act accordingly is the level that when you attain the nothingness or nirvana. The more we cultivate without any attachments and read Buddha's teachings, you will realize and will be able to see beyond the physical state. That awareness is what is called the Buddha nature. As you can see in this passage, it says, Buddha nature will emerge. Again, here, without attachment, even not being attached to this Buddha nature. It's like you're not attached to becoming a Buddha nature. The moment you're being attached, thinking that, oh, I have to get this Buddha nature, you're being attached to this Buddha nature. So the ultimate would be no attachments, and then the Buddha nature will automatically emerge, and you've reached the awareness. And that's when you reach the awareness, right? So that's why it's not like you'll attain Buddha nature. It says the Buddha nature will emerge. So once we let go of our attachments, our Buddha nature will emerge instantaneously. Another thing that I learned from this chapter that I can relate to our everyday life is how we could love anyone by seeing beyond secular phenomena, right? We should try to look, as I said before, we should try to look deeper at one we love, or anyone, even if people who we don't like at all, and we still see that person is not themselves alone. That person includes their education, society, culture, heredity, parents, and all the situations that they've gone through in their life. All those things contribute for their being. When we are able to see that, we truly understand them. If that person makes us unhappy, we can see that they did not intend, but that unfavorable conditions made them to do it. To protect and cultivate the good qualities in them, we need to know how to protect and cultivate the elements outside of them. That includes ourselves. That makes them fresh and lovely. If we are peaceful and pleasant, they too will be peaceful and pleasant. It's coming back to the same point of seeing beyond the physical being, right? If someone that you really love are angry on you, or they're upset, or they're not responding to a text or something, it's not necessarily that you have to be angry back at them. You know, if you can see beyond that, as the sentence was mentioning, if you can see beyond this fact that all the situations that's around them that's making them do it, they're helpless and they need help. If you can see that, if you can see, take a step back and see the bigger picture, I think will help us. And how do we help them? By giving them a peaceful environment. And how do we give them a peaceful environment? By being peaceful besides them and listening to them, kind of, right? If you're getting angry, or if you're going to yell back at them, and it's just going to keep going on and on and on. So this is something that I was able to relate. And while I was doing research for this, I found another video which talked about what I'm trying to say here, which I'll quickly share with you guys.
Irrespective of whether you consider Jesus a popular itinerant preacher or the Son of God, there's a very odd thing about his views on love. He not only spoke a great deal about love, he went on to advocate that we should love some highly surprising people. At one point, described in chapter 7 of Luke's Gospel, Jesus goes to a dinner party and a local prostitute turns up, much to the disgust of his hosts. But Jesus is friendly and sweet and defends her against everyone else's criticism. In a way that shocks the other guests, he insists that at heart she is a very good person. There's another story in Matthew chapter 8, where Jesus is approached by a man with leprosy. He's in a disgusting state. But Jesus isn't shocked, reaches out his hand and touches the man. Despite the horrendous appearance, here is someone, in Jesus' eyes, entirely deserving of closeness and kindness. In a similar vein, at other times, Jesus conspicuously argues that tax collectors, thieves, and adulterers are never to be thought of as outside the circle of love. Many centuries after his death, the foremost medieval thinker Thomas Aquinas defined what Jesus was getting at in this way of talking about love. He wrote, "The person who truly understands love could love anyone." In other words, true love isn't specific in its target. It doesn't fixate on particular qualities. It's open to all of humanity, even, and in a way especially, its less appealing examples. Today, this can sound like a deeply strange notion of what love is, for our background ideas about love tend to be closely tied to a dramatic experience, that of falling in love. That is, finding one very specific person immensely attractive, exciting, and free of any failings or drawbacks. Love is, we feel, a response to an overt perfection of another person. Yet, via some admittedly extreme examples, a very important aspect of love is being pushed to the fore in Jesus' vision. And we don't have to be Christian. That is, we don't have to believe there's an afterlife or that Jesus was born to a virgin to benefit from it. At the heart of this kind of love is an effort to see beyond the outwardly unappealing surface of another human in search of the tender, interesting, scared, and vulnerable person inside. What we know as the work of love is the emotional, imaginative labor that's required to peer behind an off-putting facade. Our minds tend fiercely to resist such a move. They follow well-worn grooves that feel familiar and justified. For instance, if someone's hurt us, we naturally see them as horrible. The thought they might themselves be hurting inside feels weird. If a person looks odd, we find it extremely difficult to recognize there might well be many touching things about them deep down. If unpleasant events happen in someone's life, if they keep losing their job or acquire a habit of drinking too much or even develop cancer, we're somehow tempted to hold them responsible for their misfortunes. It takes a deliberate, taxing effort of the mind to move ourselves off these deeply established responses. To do so might mean taking an unappealing-looking person and trying to imagine them, say, as a young child, unselfconsciously playing on their bedroom floor. We might try to picture their mother, not long after their birth, holding them in her arms, overcome by a passionate love for this new little life. Or perhaps drunk and passed out, ignoring their desperate cries. We might see a furious person in a restaurant violently complaining that the tomato sauce is on the wrong side of their plate. But rather than condemn and feel superior, we might try to construct a story of how this individual had come to be so impossible and how powerless they must feel in a world where something, and obviously not what they're ostensibly complaining about, has frustrated them to the core. The more energy we expend in thinking like this, the more we stand to discover a very surprising truth, that we could potentially see the lovable sides of pretty much anyone. That doesn't mean we should give up on all criteria when searching for a partner. It's a way of saying that the nicest person will eventually require us to look at them with imagination as we try to negotiate around some of their gravely dispiriting sides. And of course, the traffic won't ever be all just one way. We too are deeply challenging to be around, and therefore stand in need of a constantly imaginative, tender gaze to rescue us from being dismissed as merely another everyday monster or leper.
Yeah, so that's just a gist of one everyday comparison that we can do from the Buddha nature. If you can see beyond the physical or beyond the regular judgment that we have around things. So basically chapter 5 is realizing Buddha's nature. So Buddha is the true nature of life, wisdom, love, and happiness. Only when we can see the singleness nature do we have the chance of seeing Buddha. When we look at a rose without being caught by its signs, we see the nature of non-rose, and therefore we begin to see Buddha in the rose. And if we look into a rock, a tree, or a child in this way, we also see the Buddha in them. Buddha means coming from nowhere and going nowhere, showing no signs of coming and no signs of going, no signs of being and no signs of non-being, no sign of birth and no sign of death. So the mere existence of Tao, Buddha, and Buddha nature, let's all try to reflect back on ourselves and take a step back in hard times and try to bring our Buddha nature out and help everyone else. And by doing so, I in the last slide of today's sharing. So this 5 chapters are the first part of the Diamond Sutra, and on my next sharing we can go to part 2, which will be starting from chapter 6. So thank you all, and if you guys want to share something or you have any questions, now is the time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Yash.
Hopefully I made sense. Thanks. I'm gonna stop the recording.